Hello and welcome to the 11th meeting of the Top Shelf Society. Today we are here to discuss the book Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. And I am so excited to discuss all the great topics we have tonight. But first, I want to talk about next month's book in case you'd like to join us. Next month, we're going to be reading The Four Winds by Kristin Hannah. And our potential date for that discussion is May 28th. At 8:30 p.m. So if that changes, just check out our social media. But we already have a few people here that we want to shout out and say hello to. So, Leanne, hello.
Hey.
And Bridget. Hi, Bridget.
Hey.
What's up? What's up?
Thanks, guys, for joining us. And as always, we do a little introduction. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name's Kristen. My channel is Perks of a Book Flower. And right now, I'm really loving reading classic books. Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and this is Olivia. And me and Olivia, we love to read books together. And Olivia sometimes likes to sleep on books. And we like all of them, all the books.
Oh, look at her eyes. Oh my gosh. Hi, I'm Angela, and my channel is Angela Rose Reads, and I read basically anything, but mostly fantasy.
Hi, go for it, Laura. Oh yeah, sorry, Stephanie. I'm Laura. My channel is Laura Reads Pages, and I read a little bit of everything.
My name's Stephanie. My channel is Stephanie's Bookworth, and I read mainly fantasy, but I will do a little bit of other stuff here and there too.
All right. Well, like we said, happy to see all of you joining us. Hello, Becca, as well. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
And we are super excited to talk about Klara and the Sun. So if you're joining us, you probably have read the book, but briefest of synopsis here is that Klara and the Sun is about an artificial friend with outstanding observational qualities who wants to basically one day be picked up and taken home to live with someone, and then she is. And it's about her life with the person who takes her home, but about so many other deep topics as well that we're going to be discussing. And I guess we could go ahead and start off with talking about the genre of this book, or do you want to do predictions about who thinks it'll be like a top shelf read?
Let's do predictions. I always think that's fun.
Yeah.
Okay. Who do you predict will love this book?
I think Kristen will.
I think
love this
Kristen.
book.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
And Sarah.
I think Sarah loves this book.
Yeah, me too.
This book to me when I was reading, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a very Sarah book.
Oh, hey.
I'm not sure. I'm not willing to go either way for Sarah. I think it could be either way.
She's a wild card.
She's a wild card in my head.
I always think I'm so obvious, though. Which is funny. Because I think this one's pretty obvious, but we'll see. I think, well, I actually know one person here, so I won't say what the rating was because I saw it on Goodreads. But I didn't mean to, but I did. But let me just think. I think Kristen will be so-so.
What
I
do
don't
the
know.
people that are here think? Like,
Yes.
what do they think? Because, like, I can't say because I already know what a couple people think about it, so I don't want to spoil anything. But, like, I'm very curious what, like, Bridget and Leanne might actually know how I feel.
Well,
I haven't explicitly told anyone whether I enjoyed it or didn't.
I'm just going off like my fundamental understanding of the books you like, Sarah, which is why I feel like you would like this one. And I really want to know what Leanne thinks about this book because I don't think that Leanne reads a lot of sci-fi. But that kind of leads me into something I wanted to talk about, which is like, how sci-fi is this book, in your opinion? Like, as someone who doesn't read a lot of sci-fi, yeah, like I didn't feel like I was reading sci-fi, but what do you think?
Not really. I just think the only thing was the artificial friends, but beyond that, I feel like it really wasn't. Because that was the only science fiction that I can even really think of besides the, what they call it? The what with the kids? What is that called? Lifted, exactly. Lifted. Besides the Lifted and the AFs, like there wasn't really anything that was mentioned that was science fiction, really.
Yeah, I think that there was in science fiction, like I haven't read a lot, but there's more of, like, I find there's more of a focus on like building the world and what the future could look like. And it wasn't so much focused on that. It was more focused on the story of the characters that it happened to be set in a science fiction kind of world.
Yeah, and I was thinking about it. Do you think it's because it was like narrated by Klara? Like, do you think, because like even though Klara is like an artificial friend, I feel like she just felt so very normal, and I don't know if that affected it.
I know that I watched an interview, part of an interview with the author, and he had mentioned that by telling it through Klara's perspective, it does give a smaller scope of like it's doing it and it's keeping things unknown to her. Oh God.
Sorry.
It's keeping like things unknown to her because she doesn't really fully grasp some things or understand some things. And like, yeah, I do agree that by telling it from her perspective, it gives you certain things, but it also keeps certain things more limited because she doesn't understand like the scope of everything.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into a question I wanted to talk to you guys about. How did it feel reading a book told from the perspective of an AI?
One thing that was interesting about, because I did like watch a few interviews by the author afterwards, and one thing that he said, which I thought was so cool, was like, we will know if we've done a good job with AI, basically, if AI can write a book, which is crazy because this is Klara and AI writing a book. So I thought that was such a cool comment to make, like almost like this might have been sort of I think that this was an exploratory book in a lot of different ways. And I think that Klara was just like such a perfect narrator for this book. It really shined light on like the emotional aspect with a backdrop of like sci-fi elements, I guess.
Sorry, Sarah, who was it that said we'll know when AI has arrived when they can write a book? Who said that?
The author.
The author. Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Yeah. That's so interesting.
So, yeah, I feel like he wanted to execute. In my mind, reading it, I'm like, is this him executing an AI writing a book? I don't know. Like, I just
that's
thought
him like imagining how that would play out, or like what an AI who could write a book would look like.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
I know that normally we don't go like so deep into our discussions so early into them, but like I want to talk about Klara and the fact that she seems so much like a normal, like a human. I mean, she's like an AI, but reading her, I felt like this was a person, and yet the way that she was treated was like so horrendous because no one else saw her as a person. Like, what do you guys think about the treatment of Klara?
I thought the ending was kind of heartbreaking. And I thought it was interesting that the author chose to give Klara emotions, because it could have so easily, like I think when AI has been written about before, there described as not having any emotions. And there were certain emotions that I don't think Sarah had, like, not Sarah, Klara, that I don't think Klara had. Like, she wholeheartedly trusted her, like, the manager at the store and then her family. And she was not distracted. She was very driven by duty. So it was very clear that she could only live out sort of like what she was programmed to live out, and that was to serve this family. But she also, they describe her like being sad or happy or surprised, or anyway, I just thought that was interesting, and that's not what I expected when I started reading the book.
For me, there was like such a extreme difference seeing how she was mistreated and not processing it as I would think like someone would process it. Like she wasn't as, like I felt very strongly about the way that she was treated. And Klara, she kind of took it as like almost like an observation and didn't really emote to it in that sort of sense. And that, like, for some reason that like really, really strongly impacted me. Because there is such a like naive aspect of her, despite all the wisdom and intelligence that she has.
Absolutely. I think that was the strongest part of the novel for me, is the fact that he made her so observational, and as you said, how she processed what was happening to her, or even how she processed what was happening to her friend, like, oh, it's the sun that's going to make this better, and like different things like that, like, or what happened with the man and the dog on the street and attributing it to the sun and everything. Like I thought that was an incredible strength, like Sarah was saying too, like seeing what we think that the observations would be, but then she's not a human. So like how he was able to get into the mind of something that is sentient to a point, but not the same as we are. And so I thought that was a really interesting aspect of the book.
I also thought that was interesting because I thought it almost reminded me of superstition, which is something that I would associate more as like a human default, is, and something that you wouldn't find in an AI. But because it made sense in the book, and because she had such a limited perspective and she was so naive, she believed in these superstitions, and it's almost like a callback to earlier humans, or to us, like before we had a more scientific understanding of the world.
Well, I actually think it is logical for her to have made that choice, because they are a part of the AIs that need the sun. God bless you. That need the sun, right? They were like solar powered AFs. So like, I think that that's like a logical conclusion for her to come to, like, oh, when we don't have the sun for long enough time, we don't work optimally. So I guess humans are the same way too, but it's not true. So yeah, I agree. Like it's like part superstition, part
religion,
like,
almost.
Yeah, like her own experience, beliefs. Yeah, definitely.
And I mean, there have been cultures that have worshipped the sun. So it's interesting. It's just sort of pick whichever portion of life that sustains you to worship. I don't know.
So maybe I'm naive, but I thought that this, like in this sci-fi universe, that the sun was actually the one like fixing things, because Josie gets better after the sun like shines through her window. So did you guys think that was the sun too, or was it like a coincidence?
I think it's kind of up for debate, actually. It could very well have been a coincidence. But she did have like those spiritual experiences in the barn. What does everyone else think?
I don't know. I couldn't tell. Like I just kind of took it as ambiguous, because I mean, you could argue both ways because it was strange that all of a sudden she's better now after a whole life of not being well. So
I forget exactly what happened, but there were times where she sort of had times of, attributing things to the sun that were true and weren't true. So I was like, I think it's just a coincidence.
yeah.
Personally, but if you were to observe it and to take something from it, the most miraculous thing that happened seemed to happen due to the sun. So it could shine a light on how religions are formed and which ones, are shown to be more true or real than others based off of the coincidences that happen surrounding them. Who knows?
Yeah, Leanne was talking about that,
Yeah.
Oh.
There's a few things, so let's bring this up so we can chat about it. Leanne says, I always find the slightly detached narrative styles like this actually make it pack more of an emotional punch for us as readers. Something about it hit harder as I wanted to speak up for Klara.
Yeah.
And then speaking about religion, Leanne said, I loved the exploration of AI developing so far. They have a religion or belief system. Yeah, I think that's interesting. I don't know, it makes you question, was she programmed to, believe in the sun, or did she independently choose to believe in the sun?
But not all of the other AIs believed in the sun, did they?
So I don't think, yeah.
I don't think they did in the same way. So I don't know. Maybe there is a inclination, and not necessarily you must worship the sun, but the openness to explore supernatural or spiritual phenomenon.
Well, it's so funny. Oh,
No, go ahead.
Well, because in religion, with humans, there is the same kind of debate between free will and predestination. Like were people just created to believe in God, or do they get the choice? So it's funny that this kind of is being.
Well, that's so deep.
Yeah, with humans as the God, did we program it? Yeah, it hurt.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Sorry, I didn't try to go that deep, but it was a funny connection.
That was very deep. Wow.
Well, I took it that she was programmed to observe things and then to make connections or to make to see cause and effect relationships, and so she saw the sun revive the beggar man and his dog, and then made that association and kept it with her. And I think it was interesting how at the end of the book they called back to everything that she'd observed when she was sitting in the store window, because it was those are the first things she saw, and those were the foundation for how she understood the world throughout the whole book.
Yeah.
Are we talking spoilers? We are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
I was going to say, on that subject of making connections and observations and things like that, something that I was surprised about is that it took Klara so long to make the connection about what the mom wanted her for. Because, I thought that the very first scene where she made her act like Josie, I thought that then it was very obvious what was going to happen, what the intent of the mom was. And then more and more as she figured out what happened to her sister and the reference to oh, this happened before and things like that. And then of course the waterfall, that was over the top. You knew for sure, it was oh God, okay, well, this is happening. I was honestly surprised that I didn't get any of those thoughts from Klara, because I felt that with her observational skills that would have been quite obvious. I don't know.
I actually didn't realize that was what was happening for a long time.
It also took me an embarrassing long time.
I'm sorry.
It was I at first I was just what is she doing? Why is she making and I just was so heartbroken by it. I was what are you doing? Ugh. And then afterwards I realized, oh my gosh, she wants her to be like a bereavement AI.
Yeah.
That is a spoiler or twist, I guess.
Yeah.
And eventually, I hope our discussion kind of leads up to this whole topic about individuality and uniqueness among humans, because I think that is truly like the pivotal point, like the center point of this book is that whole idea. But we'll get there. I did want to talk to you guys about these lifted people in the society, the lifted children. So I'm getting these questions from a website, and I thought this one was really interesting. It says, what are your thoughts on the society Ishiguro created in which lifted children are afforded better opportunities and in turn a different lifestyle than those who aren't lifted?
I think it's not that far off the society that we live in today, with the discrepancy in access to education and sort of, I think it's really not that different from the society that we live in now in a lot of ways.
It reminded me of, isn't it called Crispr?
Oh yeah, he talked about Crispr in an interview.
Yeah, it reminded me of Crispr. Like, it's like a way that scientists are working to genetically change, like for real, people's genetics, like fetuses, or are they fetuses, babies? I don't know exactly what part when they're able to change it, but that's actually like fetuses. Okay, yeah, like that's actually really happening. And so I was like,
very early on in development, right? Yeah, it's like
and that's like a philosophical question that we brought up before in class about philosophy, is like, what are the ramifications of that? You know what I mean? Like that's just a whole can of worms I'm not trying to open up here. But like, it reminded me of that. Like Laura was saying, like, it's kind of nearly the society that we're already living in, where we can, like, I like Laura's example better of like access, and that changes people's opportunities. But eventually we're going to get even more into like DNA. There's a lot of things that this book touches on.
Yeah, it kind of ties into access to healthcare too, because like those things really concretely affect how someone, or what job someone can hold, or what sort of livelihood, or anyway, it definitely, it's definitely like rings true.
I think Crispr is pretty awesome. Like two females won the Nobel Prize for it, and that has never happened in I think medicine for females, to actually like win the Nobel Prize, which WTF? Why did it take so long for them to acknowledge that women actually do have science? Bless you.
Sarah, can you explain Crispr briefly? I forget.
I thought that you were talking about a book or something. See, I don't know what Crispr is. No, it's okay.
Yeah, CRISPR is just like the genetic modification, and I think that it's maybe like Stephanie knows even like better, but it's like a genetic like modification where they're taking out and putting in certain genes based off of whatever desirable traits or products that they want. And currently it's being used in like pathology, like for advancements in science and for cancer research. And for a whole bunch of different like aspects of science, and it's really amazing. So he does like sort of more of an exploratory, like, well, what if like what is sort of like the line in which we cross, like, because everyone can see it as sort of a benefit for like humanity, obviously, to try and treat those who are already affected by certain like illnesses, and in pediatric medicine, in pathology, oncology, etc. Right? So that's already like a huge benefit. But like, what if that crosses over into like defining
Yeah.
like which children, will have desirable traits, and what even are those desirable traits, right?
Yeah.
It can be, it's not eugenics really,
But
CRISPR is its own pure thing, but if CRISPR is exploited in that sense, then it goes into that realm of eugenics.
And it's similar to social media or guns or bombs and stuff. Like the intent might have been one thing, but the consequences of how humans can then handle it later can be skewed if there aren't rules or laws put into place, like
some sort of regulatory
yeah. And then like you said, what are the limits for that? What are the lines? And I actually thought that when they first started talking about lifted kids, I thought that they were talking about healthcare, like Laura was saying. I didn't, because he doesn't quite, he's very vague in his
He doesn't say what she has.
Yeah, he doesn't say a lot. He's very vague with everything, even with her dad, what he's going through with his social things and everything. It's a very vague world. And yeah, I thought that it was talking about healthcare, and then come to find out later, it's oh wait, they are genetically modified. And then, as you said, what does that mean for schooling? What does that mean for life? What does that mean for how people treat each other? It's just, yeah, and there aren't really any answers to that. It's just an interesting thought that he puts out there.
And it's interesting too, because you don't see, that Josie is lifted, but you don't really see in her interactions with Ricky or Rick, she doesn't seem any different than him. They're both teenagers, and social, she's labeled as lifted and he's not. But yeah, like Angela said, you're never shown what that means. And then the other interesting thing is there's this trade-off, which I don't know if you get in the real world, but you can have your child lifted, but risk them dying of a complication of being lifted. So it's a gamble that you have to choose to take.
Yeah, I wonder if they knew that it was a gamble.
Well, I think her mom did, Josie's mom, because her sister.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so she already knew that it could happen and decided to do it Josie again anyways, the impression I got.
Yeah, because they said, my mother's so brave.
Yeah.
She lost a sister, and she still was brave enough to take the risk with me at some point. They say that, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
To the stuff that Bridget and Leanne are saying, Bridget said that how it was interesting how we couldn't tell how much Klara was driven by free will or she was programmed that way. And then Leanne saying too, I guess it sounds like there's a lot of factors to Kazuo Ishiguro's writing that makes everyone want to keep reading and explore it and think about it. Yeah, thought-provoking, exactly.
And then Leanne says how she likes that it's vague, how it kind of leaves that interpretation. Oh yeah, that's what you said, and Bridget agrees. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess that's the great thing about books, though, especially sci-fi, fantasy, whatever. We can explore topics that are very important to our everyday life in a way that has less horrible impact on us, But we can kind of observe it and, I don't know, see how we're being affected by it.
It kind of reminded me of what did we read? Fahrenheit 451? Where it was we weren't given everything on a platter. We just kind of had to make connections with what we thought was going on in this strange world, alternate future or potential future. And there was a lot of commentary. There's so that's what I think about this book is there's so much commentary that you could go to, and I bet we could just keep going and going and going, looking at different aspects. It kind of gave me that obviously they're very different, Fahrenheit 451 and this one, but it kind of gave me the same feeling of potential futures that we could go down.
He actually said something in one of his interviews I thought was interesting, because when I walked away from the book, I thought, there's going to be different ways of reading this book. Like, it's not a book that, like, there is plot, but it's not like a page turner, in my opinion. It's sort of like he wrote something about, like, or he said something along the lines of, like, when I write books, like, there's a lot of, like, focus right now in, like, creative writing classes about trying to engage the reader at the present moment. But he said that what he seeks to do is to sort of leave impressions on people that exist for far longer, like, after they're written. So I think the vagueness sort of allows you to ponder, like, what did that actually, like, mean at the time? Like, we're given, like, all of the facts and all of the, like, explanations, but you can ponder about certain aspects of it quite a lot more. And he doesn't really give a lot of definitive answers about, like, what is good, what is bad, what is the world that they're living in, etc.
Okay. So one thing I like to talk about in any book that we read is, like, a moment that really shocked you or made you, like, really uncomfortable, because I feel like we learn a lot from those moments. So was there a moment in this book you want to talk about where you felt really shocked or really uncomfortable?
I was shocked by the ending and just by how easy it seemed to be, in a way, for the family to give her up. And then even when the manager comes and visits her in the yard with the old AIs, how easy it was for her to just walk away. And that was kind of heartbreaking. Or even Klara not knowing that she might not be around until Josie casually mentions, "Oh, if you're still here at Christmas time." And I wondered, like, because I didn't think that the mother or Josie were heartless people. And I almost wondered, because we get the scene where the mother defends Klara from Dr. Capaldi, or whatever his name was, and saying, like, let her have her slow fade out. And I almost wonder if it's like a way of emotionally protecting themselves. Like, they know that she served her purpose and that she needs to die out now. That was the only way I could understand it, because it seemed so heartless. So that was the shocking part to me.
Yeah, the ending in general of the book is very... I want to talk about what you guys thought about it, but maybe before we talk about the ending, like, any other moments that really shocked you or made you uncomfortable?
Well, I think it didn't really shock me because, like, it didn't go very far, but I think it had the potential to shock me, of the scene with all the other kids and how they were treating Klara, like, gonna throw her and stuff. Like they didn't, so it wasn't, like, that shocking, but just that moment of thinking, like, oh God, where is this gonna go? Because this could go really far. I thought the thing about that made a lot of sense, though, even though it was very frustrating, was Josie's reaction to it. Because you wanted her to defend her. You wanted her to be like, no, this is my friend. Like, this is Klara. Like, don't treat her like that. But to me, it made a lot of sense that she didn't, because especially if you're around kids and stuff, the basic human instinct is to fit in a social group. Like, that is a human instinct for survival, is you need to fit in with everybody else to be safe. And if she stood up against them, and she's trying to make these new friends to start a new life, like, they would probably immediately look down on her or make fun of her, and that would outcast her. So I wouldn't say it was shocking, but it was very much like, yeah, that's humans, you know? And it also made me sad for Klara, because, like, you know, I mean, at least Rick stood up for her.
I like Rick.
Yeah, Bridget says one thing that made her uncomfortable was the imagery of Josie's AF body.
Yeah.
Yeah. the just like floating. Definitely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so I guess now might be a good time to talk about one of the things that made me so uncomfortable, which was just this idea that Josie could be replaced with by Klara, and the fact that the mom was like on board with this plan to replace her daughter, and like as long as it was believable, like she would be fine with it. It like to me that whole concept just made me feel so strange. How did you guys feel about it?
I feel like that idea, like I've often heard the in the future we'll be able to download our brains onto a computer hard drive and then live forever as a computer. It seems like just like a different iteration of that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does, right? But like there's something in me that just completely like repels that. Like, no, humans are unique. There's like this part of us that can't be replicated.
I feel like I agree. Like, I don't get it, but also she's a mother who's like super grieving her child that she's already lost, and she thinks she's going to lose another one. And I just think she didn't think she could take that loss. Like, emotionally, she couldn't deal with it. And so this is her way of trying to deal with that grief. And I agree. I think it's kind of messed up, but like also I feel like I can't understand if I've never lost a child, let alone two, based on decisions I personally made about their like medical future.
Yeah, and I agree with, I think the mother really wanted to believe it, but I don't think deep down she did. And I think the father like alludes to that at one point and says, like, I think she really wanted to believe that Klara could become Josie because she didn't want to consider the idea of leaving Josie. But at some level, I don't think she ever could buy it or would have been able to buy into it.
Yeah, I agree with too. Like, it was interesting how Josie seemed okay with it. That was weird. I'm not weird, but I expected her to be freaked out.
Well, there was that time whenever they were going to the waterfall, and it seemed like Josie acted like really weird whenever she came back. I feel like she wasn't completely okay with it. Like you could kind of tell then, but Leanne says, do you think it's the hope and the belief that made the point we can't be replaced? Even Klara was her own in her belief.
Yeah. I think that was kind of like the kind of the central idea is that it wasn't so much that Klara wouldn't be able to replicate Josie. It was that everyone, all of Josie's loved ones, would never be able to see Klara as Josie or see in Klara what they saw in Josie, and like that's what led to her individuality rather than like something.
I think a lot about how you see this too kind of depends on your own like personal beliefs, because like I believe in like souls and that each person has their own like soul that is like unique to them, and to me I feel like that element, like the human soul and all that consists of, just can't be replicated. Like even if you were to take all of my traits and copy them onto a body that looked just like me, I think that whatever I am at my deepest core, my soul wouldn't be there. So, but like if you don't like have a belief in like a soul or something, then I can see how like that would be more believable. Or if you have a different idea about a soul.
Well, memories too, though. Like if you don't believe in a soul, it still would seem like it couldn't be replaced because Klara doesn't have all of those memories that Josie had. Like she can pretend to be her as much as she wants, but like she'll never be able to be the same. His name was Rick, right? The boy. Okay, like with Rick, she would never be able to behave the same because she's not having those experiences, and also she's not a human. So like for example, how we've been saying how she reacts differently than we would think a human would react. So, like we would expect them to be upset. well, Josie was kind of emotional back and forth a lot of the times. And if Klara couldn't be that way either, like, yeah, even just beyond the soul, but like also in just the everyday like life experience of a human, it's not as easily replicated.
And go ahead, because I just spoke, so go ahead.
I fully believe that like you could make a clone and have that clone act in the same way that Josie would. And I just also and have and implant memories, implant behaviors, and sort of be like an existing recollection, but also extension and prediction of what like Josie would be. But I fully also I very strongly believe that despite that, she would not be accepted as Josie. I don't think that could possibly happen with having others know that she is a replication.
But do you think there's anything beyond that? Like, do you think there's some sort of internal self that's not visible to the rest of the world, but that's just gone, that, you know, that wouldn't be present in Klara? Or do you think it's only...
I resonate with a quote that he has in the book that kind of, and I can't really talk about it, really. It's difficult to, but I think that a part of your soul lives in others. And I just don't think that that would be able to be captured with a clone. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just, because you can change the individual vessel, but you cannot really change others or impact them on others, because I think that part of who you are lives in others.
Something else that bothered me, I know I follow you, Sarah.
I like, it's weird to say.
Yeah.
I really just think that, but that's, yeah.
Yeah, no, I follow what you're saying. And I think that was one of deep. That was one of his main points. And I even, like, when I read, there's a part at the end that sort of puts forward that point of view. And when I read it, I remember thinking like, oh, you know, but one thing that bothered me is what would happen to Klara, because Klara seemed to me to have she seemed to have so much, like, she seemed an individual to me, even though I don't think she saw herself that way. And it was so weird to have the mother propose her becoming Josie and Klara just being like, sure, I could do that if I need to, like, without any thought of like what happens to me and my person and my individuality. That's just going to be gone. Like, what would happen to the thing that is Klara if Klara were to just be Josie?
It's really hard to think of her being stripped of all of her individuality. I hate that.
Well, do you think Klara would just like be there but just not visible to the world, and she would present as Josie, but like her whole internal life would still be Klara?
I think she would, because she was very okay with the idea, because in my view, it felt like she treated this as like her responsibility. Like, this was her purpose. She was made to be an artificial friend to whoever buys her. And to be an artificial friend, that's how it seemed like to me. That's why she accepted it so easily. She's like, of course, I'll do this for you, because this is kind of what I'm made for. I agree, though. I felt like Klara was quite individual, like what would happen. But the impression that I personally took from it was that like she almost felt like this is what she was made for, kind of, you know. Which
gives like a bit of it's conflicting how to think of it in that sort of sense, because you want the best for Klara, but if that's what she wanted, wouldn't that be the best? Or do we feel like he knows what's best for her? Yeah.
That's why the ending was also confirmed that feeling for me, because she seemed perfectly fine with it. She was like, yes, of course. Like, she wasn't very like as upset, I guess, as she could be. Like, she wasn't very upset hearing that, like, oh, if you'll be here by Christmas, or like, she just said, I started to notice that I might be gone. And then when she was there, like, the old manager asked her, like, do you want me to take you to the other AFs and you can hang out? She's like, no, I'm okay right here. Like, it almost seemed to me like, as sad as it is for us as humans, like, because we made a connection with this fictional character, like, she seemed satisfied. Like, she did her job. Like, Josie's fine now. Josie's in college. You know, it was surprising that the two didn't end up together. That was different. But of course, kids are kids. But I don't know. For me, I felt like she was like content and almost satisfied that she did what she felt was her purpose, especially knowing that she thinks, whether she did or didn't, cure Josie with the sun. And if it wasn't for her, Josie might not have gotten better, because she was the one who sacrificed for the sun to come to help her. So, like, I don't know. I just felt like she did a good job with her. Her friend.
I agree. Like, I think she was doing her duty, and she never imagined anything else for herself. And I think that was what made it, when you were reading that from the perspective of Klara, that's what made her feel not human. Like, she had the emotions and everything that humans would have that I didn't expect, but she didn't have this like self-consciousness or like awareness of herself as an individual, or sort of like fear of death and of not existing anymore that humans have.
It's unsettling. Yeah. I was like, what is the word? Unsettling. I don't know if you're supposed to like finish the book and just have an answer. I think it's just, it's like, for me, it's just, I wrote this to Leanne, but like, I think that's just a thought that's going to just like gnaw at me for like years and years. It's just so unsettling. I don't think that there's a right answer to it.
I changed my mind about my predictions. I also think Sarah really liked the book. I revised my prediction.
So can we talk for a minute about Josie? Because I want to know if you think that she is a good character or a bad character or a complicated, neutral character. Like, what are your thoughts on Josie?
I think Josie's a good product of the society that they have at that time. I don't know, that she's got that attitude of, I'm better because I'm lifted. Whilst, I mean, like, she still tries to involve Rick and she loves him right in her own way, but she still has that feeling of superiority, whether she will admit it or not. And she views Klara a certain way because of how society views AFs. And yeah, I think she really is like what a typical kid would probably be like in that type of a society. So I don't think she's necessarily a bad character or a good character. I think she's a very realistic character.
Yeah, I think she's like a true or like authentic character.
Yeah.
Oh, Yesenia's here.
Like in her position. Hi,
Yesenia. And Leanne says, she's neither. People aren't good or bad. She was human. All teens are kind of selfish. All humans are. None of us can say we've never unintentionally hurt someone else. I agree. She was a mixed bag like the rest of us. Yeah, I agree. I don't know. She frustrated me, but then again, like, who doesn't? Like, we all frustrate each other with the choices that we make. But I was just very much more concerned with Klara throughout the book, and more concerned about Klara's feelings than Klara was about her own. And so, like, I felt everything so deeply whenever Klara was neglected or told to stand in a closet for 3 days. Like, I just, you know, like for me, I was like, how could a person be so cruel? You know, like, I was just furious with Josie. I was just thinking about the moment whenever she went into the store and was like, I'm going to take you home and you're going to be so happy and we're going to live together and it's going to be so wonderful. And then she's a teenager and she's like, just go in the closet. Or maybe Klara decides to go in the closet, but Klara just like stands in the closet for days and like no one really checks in on her. Like, of course, Josie is allowed to grow up and make mistakes, but I'm allowed to be frustrated when people are cruel. And I think that Klara was done wrong. I think that if she has emotions, then people should honor and respect those emotions. And it's clear that like that's not happening in this book.
Counterpoint. Animals have emotions, yet we don't care. So it's a whole philosophical question about like, why do we care about Josie, who is literally machine parts? It's not a human, isn't pumping blood through, not like an animal, not a mammal, not a reptile, nothing. But we care so much, and we think that Josie should be afforded the same like type of respect and fair treatment that other people are afforded. But we don't extend the same thing to other things that arguably do have a soul, if you believe in souls, and like we know they have emotions. Like we know animals have emotions, and we don't care about that, but we do for something that isn't even human. So it's like, that's a whole philosophical question about like, why do we assign that personhood to some and not others? And what are the categories, and how come we do these things? So I was torn, because I'm like, at the end of the day, this is still a robot. So for me, I was like, I can kind of understand the Josie and the mom treating her not like a human, because she was still a robot.
But shouldn't
love?
I feel like what makes the difference is love. And I feel like in this book, I grew to love Klara because I did. Like, because I was experiencing her life and everything, her whole story. And I feel like I grew to care about what happened to her because I loved her. And we love our pets because they become a part of our life, and we care about and cherish the animals that we love. And I feel like once you start viewing a person or something through like the lens of love, I don't know if that's what makes the huge difference or what, but I think that that could be.
See, I think that the other characters in the book wouldn't have seen Klara as we saw her, because we were inside her head and we saw her as an individual. Whereas Josie and her mom potentially could have just seen Klara, as a machine that was programmed to say and do these things. And they weren't privy to that like internal life that we were privy to. I still completely agree with Kristin in that like people love their animals and are very upset when they have to have their pets put down. I mean, it is I also agree with Angela. I don't think.
Well, I'm more referring to like animals that we eat. I'm not necessarily talking about cats and dogs.
Yeah. But I'm just saying like we are capable of like empathizing or of like loving animals. But it didn't seem like they had any similar attachment to Klara, or like they didn't even seem upset when she other than that one protective incident when the mother protecting her from Dr. Capaldi, like they seemed to be okay with letting her go, in a way that I don't think people are okay with letting their dogs go, or with, yeah.
I think a part of it is like about shared experience too, like because I don't particularly love the random chicken I never saw, like, and I hate to be like gross, but like I don't like love like some random chicken that I then ate. But like if a chicken were to come into my like yard and like show up all the time, and I start to like grow a connection with it, like I would eventually love that chicken, and I would start to like treat it with like, like with like more like loving qualities. And if something happened to that chicken, like I would be very sad. And so I think that part of it has to do with our relation to like the creature or the thing or whatever.
It's actually go like both ways on either extreme, because some people are different in that they do love and care about that animal, even if they've never had a shared experience with it. But then on the other spectrum, there are some people that even have pets that they love and adore, and they treat them like they're nothing. So like all humans are completely different in how they empathize and interact with other living or non-living things. So that's like an AI discussion of like, to what do we afford that if some people like, you know, yeah.
I think sort of, as a vegan, I have a lot of very deep thoughts about like what we attribute and like empathize with, etc. I guess what I felt about this, it's like there were parts where Klara wasn't even considered like she was like a vacuum or like a freaking like she was just an object. And I think that's what was so disgusting about like the way that she was treated. It was like she was nothing unless she did what they wanted her to do. And that was just completely like completely appalling, like to just sort of that was very very like gross to see. But at the same time, right, Klara, like I agree with the whole conversation surrounding like what are we actually like privy to as a reader. We're experiencing her story, like we're living through her story in that society. Who knows what we would actually think about AIs? Like, how do we think about AIs right now? Like, we think of them as objects. Like, robots, we don't think that they're anything that has a soul. And at what point would we actually allow ourselves to think that? Like, what does an AI have to do for us to believe that it could be considered something greater than an object?
I also think that I was shocked. Like I have already said, that's the part that I found the most shocking was Klara's treatment and just like go stand in the store cupboard. But there was also that scene where Josie goes and opens the skylight window so that Klara can look out. And I do think that there's what satisfies Klara is different than what makes a fulfilling life for Klara is different than what would make a fulfilling life for a human. And I think maybe you could argue that just being able to sit and observe and look out, it was enough for Klara. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but I just I think I can imagine the characters in the story seeing it that way, or even at the yard at the end when the manager leaves her there, knowing that like for Klara just to be able to observe the world and try to figure it out is enough to satisfy her or make her happy or whatever.
And I have to plug, for anyone watching, I have to plug the movie AI, Artificial Intelligence by Steven Spielberg. It's exactly this, but way more in-depth and long and dramatic. Like it's the story starts, this is no spoilers, with we're in a time where there are AI, but you see the progression of like the early ones that are more like robotic with like a TV screen head, and then there's like later ones and it goes on, and now they're up to the point where there's an AI that you can't tell the difference between it being a human or not. And he's a little boy. It's the kid from The Sixth Sense, Haley Joel Osment. When he was a little boy, he's the AI when he was little, and he has emotions. It might not be necessarily the same as humans, but he really does have emotions, and yet he's not a human. And so without giving anything away, like it's a very long journey of him trying to become a real boy and like wanting people to see that. And there are scenes where like people will react more strongly to him versus the other robots because he claims to have emotion. He looks more like a real boy. So it's like that idea of like, if they all have the same sentience and thoughts and reality, like how come we're more likely to treat this one differently than this one? And like, what does it take to be considered a real human? Like what we're talking about, like how Kristin and Sarah like felt for her so much and was like, Klara is a person for all intents and purposes. And it's just like this little boy AI's journey, and also his interactions with his parents that like adopt him or whatever you would say. And it's heartbreaking. It's very, very good. It's a wild ride, but it's so in depth about this entire discussion. That was all I could think about while I was reading this book. I was just like, I really almost wish I hadn't seen that movie first, because it made this so like barely scratching the surface, you know, but it's a good introduction into these kinds of conversations and thoughts about like what makes people unique and different, all the stuff that we've already talked about today.
Yeah, it ties into what Sarah and actually Kristin said earlier, because like I haven't seen the movie, but the boy AI, the one that people were able to love and able to like, I guess, empathize with, or, you know, like become attached to, was the one that they saw as being real, kind of like what Sarah said, like parts of your soul living in other people. And it was almost like in this story, no one saw Klara that way, but we saw Klara that way because we got to see inside her head. So then we're just like completely shocked and heartbroken by how she's treated. But in the story, like they it's like they don't have parts of Klara's soul in them, if we can continue with that analogy, or like they don't see her as some that way. So yeah.
I don't want to like beat this point to death, but like, you know how children like love their stuffed animals so much when they're little, and like it's like their stuffed animals are real and it exists to them, and like to lose it is like a great trauma, like for a child. And I feel like Josie treated Klara like that whenever she was younger, more appreciative of her. And then in the same way that when a kid gets older and like they kind of stop seeing their toys in the same way, it was kind of a similar thing for Josie.
I thought the same similar like analogy that you just gave. That's a good one.
Yeah. And so I think that like love is a huge factor in it, but I think also like, I don't know, like belief and age and innocence, like there's so many different factors, I guess, at play in that, all of that. Wow. So I feel like out of all of the books that we've read, like this one has kind of left us with the least amount of answers. Like, just things to like consider and think about. Is there any other topic or point of discussion that you guys want to bring up? Something that you feel like we have to include?
I just am gonna check the questions because there may have been one.
Okay.
I feel like we had a pretty well-balanced discussion.
Yeah, I was looking through mine and I think we covered everything in kind of like our own little roundabout way. Oh, well, we didn't talk about loneliness.
Oh, yeah, that's
the topic.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we can talk about loneliness really quick in the story, and then we'll move on to Is This a Top Shelf Read? All right. So we should discuss like the theme of loneliness, how it comes up in the story, and maybe some ways that the AFs tried to combat or like exacerbate their loneliness. What do you think? Oh,
okay, well, I want to talk, but I didn't want to
go. Yeah, I feel like we all do that. We're like, oh, I just talked last, so I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Let someone else take this. Yeah. Well, I thought it was it was so sweet how also Klara always referred to Josie in the third person. She never referred to her in the second person, even when she was talking directly to her. So she's like, well, if Josie wants to be with Mother, maybe she'll be less lonely, and Josie won't need Klara. So I just thought it was, Klara understood this need that people have for connection, but she never felt lonely herself, or never, that was never a motivation for her. Like, she was willing to give up Josie, so Josie wouldn't be lonely, but she never had that consciousness to think, oh, will I then be lonely? And even in the yard at the end, the manager comes and says, oh, there are some other AIs. Would you like me to carry you over to them so that you're not lonely? And she says, no, I'm happy just sitting here on my own. So it just, like, I think it almost comes back to that idea of like love, like Kristin said, or like Sarah said, of people like seeing something in you. But so I just thought the, like, Klara not having that drive that people have, that humans have to avoid loneliness, I thought that sort of set her apart from people, from, like, it made her seem less human when you were reading it. And it's, so anyway, that was my take on it.
And like, Klara notices loneliness so much, like, in the humans around her, even though she doesn't like experience it herself. And she kind of like ends up saying that, like, she comes to this grand conclusion that a lot of the huge issue for humans and the reason why they suffer is due to loneliness. And I think that that's a very astute observation, like, just thinking of my own life, let alone other people. And I don't know.
I think what's interesting about this book is it's like, when you're talking about AIs, in a way, you can't avoid the question, like, what makes us human? And instead of what I expected was like having emotions makes you human, but she has emotions. And so it's these other things, like not having like a sense of self, or like not feeling loneliness. So I just think, are you okay, Kristin? Yeah. So it's those things that sort of set humans apart, according to this interpretation.
Yeah, loneliness stinks.
It definitely does.
But I also think that humans will sometimes suffer just because they're afraid of what they think is going to make them lonely. Like people that stay in harmful relationships just because they don't want to be alone, or, you know, what the mom was considering doing because she didn't want to be lonely after Josie passed and things like that. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. It can go both ways.
Yeah, it's like a drive away from loneliness for good or for bad. Yeah.
The human experience, man. The human experience.
That face just like
Laura, look,
up.
like she was like really like just milking out that like thought. Like I was like, what?
But I think the back of the book, like, do you believe in the human heart? I don't mean simply the organ. Obviously, I'm speaking in a poetic sense. The human heart. Do you think there's such a thing, something that makes each of us special and individual? And like that question about whether it's outside of ourselves and whether it's like how others see us, or whether it's intrinsic in ourselves. I think that it doesn't really give a conclusive answer, because there's so many ways in which it seems like what made Josie was individual was how her loved ones saw her or thought of her. but then at the same time, we're inside Klara's head and we are reading and thinking of her as an individual and like feeling for her. But no one else sees, you know, like no one else in the story sees that. So it's almost like she has an internal like soul. So it's, yeah, I don't know. You could think about it both ways. And I'm done talking. I'm done.
Honestly, your face when you were like lost in deep thought, like it just sums up like this whole discussion we've had. Like that
So
was
confused.
it. I haven't like made the thumbnail yet, so I need to go back and just like your face.
Oh, no.
Yes, it was great.
We do have a question from Bridget. She says, what did you think about Rick's mom? That's a good point to bring up too. Yeah, she was like representing, I guess, like the old, I don't know if you'd say it the old way of thinking, but she like did not want Rick to be lifted. Like she wanted things to kind of, like she was against it, I guess, for whatever reason. And she was kind of like more old-fashioned, like her house was kind of more old-fashioned and all of that.
I liked her.
Yeah, I agree with what Bridget said. I feel the same way. Like, I thought that she was like the most level-headed, even though everyone thought she was weird. Like, I was like, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt as well with her.
Probably because she's most aligned to us and how we view things now, right? I mean, that's why we see her as like kind of more level-headed. Okay, well, I did want to talk quickly about the other AI. I just had this thought pop into my head, the one that was Klara's friend.
Rosa?
Yeah, Rosa. And like, it's kind of, is it implied? I don't know if it's implied or if he just flat out says that like Rosa has had a different experience than Klara as an AI. And I guess like there are different ways that AIs can be like, you know, treated in their different circumstances and at home and everything. So what did you guys think happened to Rosa?
Oh my gosh. I don't even want to know what happened to Rosa.
I know.
One thing that's so unsettling about this book is just thinking of the millions of ways that AI could be exploited, and I'm so like scared to know. Like, I don't necessarily think what happened with Rosa could be like the extreme of what I'm thinking of, but I just think that there just leaves such room for like exploitation of AI. I don't, yeah, sometimes humans aren't that great.
It's kind of like a different version of slavery in a way.
Or yeah, ownership or dominion, yeah.
Counterpoint. I'm not trying to be the devil's advocate because I don't believe in being a devil's advocate. I'm just actually genuinely have counterpoints is, would you rather that happen to an AI or a human?
Neither.
Or do you hold them equal? If you had to choose.
But would you would you have to choose?
I'm not sure what Sarah was implying, but if you're talking about, I don't want to say this on here, because you're talking about them being exploited, right? Like being used for things that is not appropriate or shouldn't be. And if someone was going to do that anyway, I would rather them do it to a machine rather than, and I'm not talking about any specific thing, I just mean a variety of things that would fall under the term of exploited. Like, I would rather that happen to a machine than a real person, because I'm not sure that it will ever even be possible for AI to have emotions and things like that. Because this is all fantasy. We don't know if we'll ever get to a point where AI can have emotions. And
counterpoint.
Yeah.
Very salty counterpoint. Would you rather
go for it?
Would you rather it happen to a human or an animal?
Also, salty counterpoint, you can erase those memories from an AI because you programmed them to begin with. So you can just like take away the memories and emotions that came with those experiences and they will no longer have them. But you can't do that to a human or an animal. So,
and I don't think we're going to have AI programmed to feel pain if that's the type of thing we're talking about. I think like physical sensation.
Why wouldn't we have an AI like experience pain?
Why would we have an AI experience pain? What would be the purpose of that?
How could you make an authentic soul otherwise?
I'm not talking about trying to make a soul.
You could say in the book, like, she feels sadness, which is kind of like akin to pain. And there's also the, like, she doesn't feel like distress in the same way, but she also feels happiness. Like when Klara can sit and observe the world, that is when she is the most content. And like, to not allow her to realize that is a sort of cruelty in a way, even though she won't experience like the same pain that we would have. And even if you could go back and program that memory out of her, I don't think it takes away from the act of the human, like the cruel act of the human to deprive her of these things, or to deliberately make her sad or whatever.
Well, yeah, anyway, the human would be cruel regardless. I'm obviously, I'm not talking about how the human would be. I'm talking about the human is going to be cruel. Would we rather them be cruel in whatever way it is to a real person or to a machine? Because like when we call them like by a name and stuff, we are personifying them, but in essence they are machinery, because as we said, we don't know that they are going to be able to have emotions or deep thoughts or like I said, pain receptors, like physical pain receptors and stuff like that. Like for all intents and purposes, they're just a robot and a machine. And like Stephanie said, like we could get rid of those memories. Like it's terrible either way. I'm not advocating for this at all in any way.
Even if you can erase the memories, it doesn't, like, I don't think it makes the act that the human did any less cruel, you know? So does it make it less wrong that you can take it away, you know?
I'm more thinking of like the thing that it's being done to, not the cruelty of the person, because the person is cruel either way. But like as far as the world that we live in, would we rather someone be cruel? Like Rob said, can a hammer be exploited? Like essentially an AI is a tool. We wouldn't create it because we have plenty of humans on Earth. Like we have a lot of people on our planet. So if we were to create artificial humans, I don't think it would be to like be the same as humans. It would be for a purpose, like for a company or for like a purpose that we could utilize them for, a lot of with capitalism especially. So like
I wonder where society would go if we sort of went further down that road of whether or not what can we rather ourselves be cruel to? Because you sort of have to have that thought of the act and whether or not the act is right or wrong. Because if there is an entire population where you are permitted or it's less severe, whether or not you hurt them, then could that potentially like propagate the act of like cruelty or violence?
Well, like I said, like in my mind, I would imagine if we are going to make artificial humans, it would be most likely knowing us for a capitalist purpose. So for example, like Stephanie works at the NICU, right? Like say they created an artificial nurse that could be up 24/7, doesn't need to eat, doesn't need to go to the bathroom, could take care of the babies, doesn't need anything. That's technically exploiting them because they don't have any, we're not treating them like we would treat a human. We would never do that to a human. But wouldn't you rather that happen to a machine that we made to that rather than exploiting a human and forcing them to like work under difficult conditions 24/7, like hardly, you know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of what I'm trying to get at is like, but it doesn't have to be a cruelty, but exploiting is a broad word. Like you could mean that in any.
See,
number of things.
I wouldn't consider like a robot that worked in the ER. I wouldn't consider that exploitation, but it all sort of depends on the level of, I guess, almost consciousness of the machine. Because like here, Klara feel like you can understand what serves Klara and what doesn't. And even if it's not the same as a human, like her, you could do things to her that would be cruel to do to a human that would not be cruel to do to Klara, if you understand.
Yeah.
But there are still some ways in which she can be done wrong by, if you know what I mean.
It is a really interesting like question to do or to ask when we already do exploit humans.
Yeah.
So much and so greatly in many different ways. So I mean, of course this would happen, and it really depends on what the society defines as acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And you can see different cultures in terms of what is considered exploitation and what isn't. Working, sex work, like etc. Like there's just so many levels to that. But in terms of like in terms of the character that we were presented with in this book, it's very difficult because I had such like Kristin was saying, like protective but like maternal sort of feeling towards her. And yeah, I understand that I was projecting a lot of what I wanted to have happen to Klara. It may not have aligned with what she would have wanted or how she was treated, but I can't separate it. I'm not that good at separating my emotions. I was highly emotional, like reading this book, and so to me, this book was, it was a real exploration in terms of what is love, like what can we love, what is able to love others, and that sort of thing. And I would feel like at the end of it, I was presented with a character that I loved. So it's hard. I can't answer that question rationally.
I'm going to say this again, but it just keeps coming back to that, like, isn't an external thing, like, do we put love onto objects and that's what makes them more than objects? Or is it like something like internal, you know?
I believe that is. Like, I truly believe that our love that we put onto something or whatever has like a power to raise it up to something else, regardless of what it is.
And like, again, I do think that like from all the neuro research that I've done, I really do think that you could, like, it's wiring, like our consciousness is wiring. And I think that you like could implant that into something else, but it wouldn't necessarily be like, I don't think it would be able to like capture that person's essence. That's like undefinable. Like whether or not that's spiritual, whether or not it's like an essence of a person that lives on to others, like there's just something there that kind of goes beyond that, whether or not like you're able to, I don't think that you're able to program that aspect of it. Basically, I think you can aspect what that person does, how they function, what they think. You can predict how people will act in certain situations. So many things you can, it's wiring. It's like synapses. It's like you can have pain. It's like you can potentially create something. Just because we don't have the technology now, it doesn't mean that we won't. So it would just be what our definition of a machine is, like, or when we would allow ourselves to say, like, this is a conscious, like, individual entity, I think.
I think it's going to be something that we're going to have a lot to grapple with in the future, because like the same way how we're dealing with the ramifications of the internet, and what that has done to society and how that has changed society in a way that we never expected. I feel like that's going to be a huge one too. Like at what point do we consider this machine like a person? Can it be, like you're saying, like, and what do we owe that machine versus what do we owe people who are alive that we mistreat as it is? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's going to, because as you said, I'm sure eventually we'll get there. It's going to be a big whole ethical conundrum.
Do you think we'll ever get to an AI that could write a book? Like that was the sort of the inspiring what if that led to this book. What did you say, Klara? Klara, Sarah. Oh my God, what's with those names? What did you say, Sarah?
Well, I think that you can get to the point. In my mind, if I think about like how this will progress in the future, what I think is that already what's starting to happen is we are hybridizing like our thoughts with technology, and we're exploring that aspect of it right now. And I think what's going to happen is that eventually we'll sort of hybrid like individual parts. Like we're already seeing certain like machinery being implanted into people, like, and I think that once we sort of get to the point of implanting thoughts or ideas, then we're going to get closer and closer until it sort of becomes its own thing. And it will just kind of be like evolution, like not necessarily like just like a different sort of lineage, its own sort of thing, and it will capture parts of us as humans and sophisticated parts of technology. And at that point, I definitely think that they'll be able to write a book and way more.
Before going in, I actually agree with you, but before going into the discussion, I would have said, and I'm still like going in between, actually, Leanne just said something. Books are about what it means to be human and the soul. It's art. If that's not something we have that makes our species different, I don't know what to think. And that was my, like, I believed that coming into this discussion, and then just listening to Sarah there, now I'm confused because I believe that AI will be able to copy and piece together and imitate other art, like not create, but imitate. And then I also believe we could create AI that observes, like Klara, that observes the world. And is there any more to writing a book than imitating other art and then observing the world around you? Like, to me, I'm like, that's writing a book. AIs could do that at some point. I think
fundamentally it's interesting because I think fundamentally, like, it won't be for us to decide whether or not it is art. It will be of the society that has that art presented to them. And if that can happen, like the way that it, like if Klara like wrote this book, like now I'd be like, okay, yeah, I believe it. Like, because this to me was like definitely like it wasn't. I believe that good writing or a good book is imitation, and we basically hear the same story over and over again in different sort of ways. But they each almost have their own soul unique to them. And I think that once an AI can do that, then that would be like a book.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I might be with Leanne. I might be with Sarah. I'm not sure.
I might be with Leanne. I don't know.
I don't know.
And then you have like Asimov's laws and all of that about like, then how would humans and AI interact? Like, what would be their duty to us? What would be our duty to them? It's just such a complex, like, such an interesting, with no answers. That's what's frustrating. We don't have any answers to any of these questions. But yeah,
he doesn't want to leave us with answers because he doesn't know. Like we have no idea what the world is going to be like. And what we might be horrified by, the society in which they are in may applaud it. Who knows?
Yeah, it's wild.
Whew.
I love sci-fi books and movies and stuff like that. Like iRobot and AI and all that stuff. Like it's because we're gonna get there, and it's interesting to see. Okay, what are some people's thoughts of what's gonna happen? Because it's gonna change the world. You have to figure out everything different, like how you interact with each other, and there'll be prejudices against each other, like they always show. Like it's gonna be. I wonder if we're gonna be around to see it. I wonder if we want to be around to see it.
Do we want to?
I don't know.
Can we handle it?
I don't know.
I'm going way off into fantasy land now, but I think that what makes AIs different is that it's us who create them. So for them to reproduce, they need us. Except if we make an AI that's intelligent enough to recreate itself, like to build itself. Yeah. So I feel like in the future, humans are going to hoard the technology and the resources to build AI so that AI can't reproduce themselves, so they can't have that power. And that's going to be the war of the future.
That's
AI human war.
Definitely going to.
All right. Well, let's talk about if this was a top shelf read. I guess since I'm in the first square, I'll speak first. And I really liked this book, but I am too sensitive for this book. And I do not think it's a top shelf read for me. Especially the ending, it just hurt me so much. And while I do think that there's something to be said for a book that has such an emotional impact on you, I mean, it's definitely great. But for me personally, it didn't have a lot of the things that a top shelf read would have for me, like a kind of sense of emotional satisfaction. But I loved how thought-provoking the book was. I mean, clearly, this book has made me think so much. It's just a matter of personal taste.
There.
I can go next. I was also, as Kristin said, I was also devastated by the ending and disturbed a little bit by parts of this book as well. But it was definitely upset coming away from reading it. But I think just a different interpretation, because it evoked such strong emotions, I took that as a sign of it being a top shelf book. So that's my take.
Yay! Also, Bridget says that it's a top shelf read for her. Yay!
And Leanne loved it too.
Oh, top shelf! Yay! Okay.
I guess I'll go then. I kind of already said I kind of almost compare it to Fahrenheit 451. I think it's a book that people could have wonderful and important discussions on, but it wasn't a top shelf for me personally because it was too low key. I like a lot more dramatics. I'm not so much liking the sci-fi that's really low key. And I think if I hadn't seen AI so many times, this would have, if this was my first intro into AI and the concept of, like I said, personhood and sentience and all of that, I think it would have been such a more astounding look. But in having already looked into it so much, it was just a little crumb. It was just a tiny little intro to it. So for me, it wasn't as in depth as I wanted, but I think that there was clearly so much to discuss as we did, and so much value in so many things that he was able to put into it. So it's not a top shelf, but I do think it's a great discussion book for sure.
I want to hear Stephanie's.
Yeah, that's fine. I actually didn't even finish the book. So it was not a top shelf read for me, obviously. I thought it was, I actually felt very similarly to Angela because I have read quite a bit of sci-fi before. And so this is not a new concept to me whatsoever. And I feel like it has been explored so much better. And I've enjoyed AI characters. I've been a lot more intrigued by them and drawn into different AI characters that I thought had more depth and were more interesting. So I think that this one just wasn't there for me. I feel like this one's very appealing to a wider variety of people, though, who aren't necessarily into sci-fi, because it almost wasn't sci-fi. It was such soft sci-fi that it was easily accessible, right, to everybody. So I think that's something that's probably very appealing about this book. But I don't know. I actually thought it was really boring, and I just could not make myself finish it. So yeah.
Do you know how it ends, or were you confused?
Yeah, I read a summary.
Okay.
Yeah, I just Googled a summary of it because I was like,
if not, you would have been really confused.
Yeah, I just didn't have a ton to contribute because I didn't read it.
Laura had to get her charger, she said. Sorry.
Oh, I was wondering what happened. Okay, so for me, this hey Laura. Maybe I'll just wait for Laura to get her charger set up.
Take a shot every time I blow my nose. Just kidding, please don't.
I would die. No.
I think I have a fever. It's okay.
Have you gotten vaccinated?
Yeah, I have been. It was like over a month ago. Yeah.
Okay. Worried for a second.
Yeah, I just can barely keep my eyes open.
Okay. I'll try and be short. Yeah, this definitely was a top shelf read for me. I cried so much. I didn't even think I would be able to talk to you guys about this book because when it first started and there was the beggar man.
Pet Livia. Hug her.
I'm trying to just think. Okay, so sorry.
Don't apologize.
But it was I felt very maternal towards Klara, and I guess I like books that show a light on where we need to improve as people, and I think that this book definitely showed that. But I don't think I can really probably say like all the ways that this book resonated with me, but it really did.
I'm so glad then.
Yeah, that's so special.
And I liked that this book sort of showed it showed sci-fi, but it did it in like a very low-key way. But yeah, I thought it was I obviously really liked it.
This was your suggestion too, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had.
You knew. You just knew.
I'm really sorry. I don't know why it has this effect on me, but it really does.
That's good.
And
has anyone read? This is tying back to Sarah, I promise. And maybe, but Kristin, have you read Tales from Wayside School or Sideways Tales from Wayside School?
Yes, I've
the
read
children's
that.
book. And there's the one scene where the little boy, anytime the kids sing Puff the Magic Dragon, the little boy starts to cry. And then his teacher says, did you know, like, you enjoyed that song more than all of the other kids? It's like, oh, that's what this means? That just reminded me of this.
I firmly believe that stories have a way of finding us, like finding who they belong to, you know? And I just think that this story really belongs to you, Sarah, and I'm so happy you found it.
Yeah, I'm so glad it was your pick too. And yeah, it's so amazing when you find a book that,
this book definitely was for me. But like, in like a very, like, I don't think that this is really like necessarily like a book for everyone. For instance, like if you want a book that has like world building, this is not the type of book. Like, you barely know anything about the world at all. It's not really presented to you. It's not a book that like you want to just like flip through and like, sorry, there's a car outside. It's not really like a book that you want to just like kind of like figure out like what's the twist, or like I didn't even think that there was going to be a twist. You know what I mean? Like I think that what I liked about this book is that it like shined a light on like the ways in which we mistreat people like currently, and what we need to like what it actually takes for us to love others. At what point do we stop? And at what point do we allow ourselves, and who do we allow ourselves to love? And so, yeah, I really liked it for that reason. And I think that on a base level, this is a story about like AI, but you can explore this to other cultures, and at what point do we, you know, like at what point do we stop connecting with others, and what happens when we like sort of like lose that connection? Because there are certain societies where certain groups or even sexes are not, you know, for whatever reason, held to the same standards as another. And AI is just kind of an extension of that. Like, at what point would we actually allow ourselves to love and care for a machine? And at what point do we stop thinking that it's a machine or not? Or like, where do we allow ourselves to love animals? And what animals do we love? And which ones do we not? And how do we treat them? It's just like, how do we treat and care for others? And what makes someone important? That I really like about this book. Yeah. And I think that people need to sort of question that in order for us to take better care of those we love around us right now, as best as we can. So it's not really a sci-fi book for me. It's more like a just compassion, empathy, just basic, simple stuff.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Very well said, I think. Mm-hmm. One thing that I have to say before we end is I've now been seeing like the patterns of the sun everywhere that I go. On the living room floor. I thought that was a really kind of poetic part of the story as well.
I loved that. Everything with the sun. Mm-hmm. I guess to sum up the live show, we can just say this.
Absolutely.
There you go. Every time we have a discussion, I always feel like, man, that was like the deepest discussion we've had yet. And then we have another, and it's like even more deep and intense than before. And my brain like craves it. I love these discussions. So, and anyways, okay, well, there you have it. That was our 11th meeting of the 11th meeting of the Top Shelf Society. That means that next month is our anniversary. A year ago, we were planning to read Emma. Sarah, you had no idea what you were getting into. Emma. Everything that it would bring to you. But yes, so
can I ask a question about this? So, since this is Sarah's book, can you think of a food that this book is like we normally do?
Oh yeah.
Does any food resonate with you when you think of this book? Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, because it's your book. This is
strawberry shortcake, easy.
There you go. This is our strawberry shortcake book.
I don't know why, but it just is. It just is.
Yeah.
There we go.
I was gonna say jelly donut, so very similar.
Close.
Jelly donut, strawberry.
The same thing.
Nice. Okay, so we will be reading The Four Winds for our anniversary live show, which is tentatively going to be Friday, May 28th at 8:30 p.m. So last Friday of the month, as per usual. And we hope to see you there. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.